Okay, this meeting of the Industrial Development Board is called to order. It is now 7:06, starting a few minutes behind schedule, but we are all here. We do have a quorum. Miss Leah Petty could not be here tonight. Mr. Robert Thurman has resigned, and we will address that a little later in the meeting, but he is not here tonight. But a new appointee that takes his place, Miss Tracy Belcher, is here instead. So the only person that I think is currently not present is Mr. Moreland. So we do have a quorum. If you would, meeting is called to order. Please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First action on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the last meeting, which was February 24th. It should be the second page in your packet. Please review that if you haven't already. And if there's any amendments, adjustments, or corrections that need to be done, please make note of that now. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Graves.
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
Mr. Graves makes a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second? Mr. Seth Thurman is a second. All in favor say aye. All opposed? It does pass. The next item number 5, is the treasurer's report. You should see that. It should be, if I did my job right, it should be the third page in your packet. It was not sent to you in advance. We did not get it until today. With the transition, it was a little delayed, but you can see that we've had no activity. We had a beginning and an ending balance of $89,511.50. I'll need a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Ms. Bay makes a motion. Do I get a second? Mr. Graves makes a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Treasurer's report has been accepted. Excuse me. Item number 6, just an update, a status update on the pilot program. We have had some historic steps forward with this, and really excited. At last month's county commission meeting, the pilot policies and procedures and program was adopted by the county of Trousdale, and we now have a pilot program, and that is a very exciting thing. The next step in that process was to appoint a third person to the 3-man committee. The preliminary committee, which would consist of the mayor, the chairman of the IDB, and an unelected citizen. Since Mr. Robert Thurman has resigned, we accepted his resignation last week. He became eligible at that point to be considered for that position, and he was approached by Chairman Jewell. This appointment was at the discretion of the Chairman Jewell, to make. He did confer with myself and the mayor, and I believe we both concurred that Mr. Thurman would be an excellent choice, given his experience as a commissioner, his experience in banking and finance, and understanding the overall impact on the community that a pilot program can have, and also his participation in the pilot policies and procedures document itself. He was already fully qualified and experienced to walk in the door and be able to make a good and thoughtful decision for the community. And we were happy to see him accept that nomination. And last night he was confirmed. So number 7 is to notate that we have officially had a resignation by Mr. Robert Thurman. And Subsequently, last night, he was nominated and approved as the third person in the three-man preliminary committee for the pilot program. We would like to thank Mr. Thurman for his service, his unselfish efforts towards this community. He serves with dignity and honor, and we are a better board for his presence and his participation, and he will be sorely missed. He has been a very active part of this community in one form or another for a great many years, and I'm sorry to lose him. But when one door closes, another opens. So we now have a new member who was appointed in his stead last night by the County Commission, and that is Ms. Tracy Belcher. Ms. Tracy Belcher is more than qualified and very eager to participate with this board. We're excited to have her. And she will also be the representative for First National Bank. Historically, this board has always had representatives from each bank. Mr. Seth Thurman from Wilson Bank and Trust, and with the absence of Mr. Robert Thurman, now we have Ms. Tracy Belcher for First National, formerly Citizens. So welcome to Ms. Tracy. That does leave an open position on our officers list. The treasurer position is now vacant. I will say that I have spoken to Ms. Belcher, and she would accept a nomination if someone would choose to nominate her. If you have a different person you would like to choose, that is fine, but I'm going to open the floor for nominations for treasurer. I have a motion by, or a nomination by Mr. Seth Thurman. Is there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Ms. Belcher, do you still feel like you would accept that position? I've had a discussion with Ms. Belcher. Also, Mr. Thurman works with her on a daily basis, so she can more than adequately cover the position. No problem at all. She's perfectly suited to do so. I would say that by acclamation, Ms. Tracy Belcher is voted as the new secretary for the Industrial Development Board of Hartsville, Trousdale County. So welcome. Mr. Mayor, do I have to get a vote on that? Okay, just make sure I do that correctly. All in favor of Tracy Belcher taking the position of treasurer for the Industrial Development Board, say aye. Any opposed? It does carry. Welcome, Tracy. Other business, item number 10. I'm going to turn this over to the mayor. You'll see in your package you have a 7-page document, and this is a pivot and recover grant that the mayor is going to explain to us, and I'm going to ask the mayor to go over this as carefully as possible because I don't think any of us have really had an opportunity to read this very carefully. So if you will help us understand, that would be wonderful. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this 7-page document was given to you. It's mainly just for informational purposes. If we apply for this grant, this is basically what our submission would be for the questions that's going to be asked. So it has some specific to Trousdale County information in here. So first I'll cover what this grant is we were in the Department of Economic and Community Development's Tennessee Downtowns program, which is a program they have to revitalize rural downtown areas. As part of that, we did a closeout for that program. We actually finished it a couple of weeks ago. They were talking about next steps, and one of the things that the ECD representative and consultant suggested was looking at the Placemaker Grant they have. We had looked at that in the past. It normally has been used to do an evaluation of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in your county, to propose how to go forward to develop that. It can talk about co-working spaces, entrepreneur centers, angel investor programs, mentor-mentee programs, those kind of things. And that's the typical or the historical Placemaker Grant program. Well, the state was given some funds by the federal government, and one of the things they did is create a phase two or a second option for the Placemaker Grant, and they called it Pivot and Recover. It's basically you can provide technical assistance, cover some other expenses, or you can create a micro grant program. Looking at some of our requests I've gotten lately, a lot of businesses have asked for some kind of help. Looking at it, this can provide technical assistance, and that can be helping them with what's called Omnichannel, which means they would have a brick and mortar location plus also an online business. That's been found that if you have both of those, so you're what's called Omnichannel, it increases the success of a business. So it's less likely to fail going forward if it has both of those online. So if you have an online presence and pair that with in-person shopping, it increases the likelihood that you're going to be successful. It can also help you do other kinds of evaluations, look at your business model, do one of them it's going to look at is a restaurant, so it can help do technical assistance to restaurants. And the consultant group on that would be Retail Strategies. This is something they're assisting another community with. They actually recently done an application with another community to help them with it. So they're willing to help us. So what I'm proposing is we do the Pivot and Recover and use that to retain Retail Strategies, which I was on a Zoom call with Lacey Beasley this morning from Retail Strategies. This grant can go up to 100,000, and for her services would be somewhere around 71,000. I would also ask that we're going to use some of that for an administrative fee. Ms. Beasley was going to get some clarification on that, how much percentage that can be. It varies from grant to grant what that percentage can be. And the reason I'm going to ask for an administrative fee to be included is because currently my executive assistant, Amy Thomas, is the one that is our grant administrator on all our grants. So that's time it takes from her to do these programs and whatnot. And in the past, we haven't done administrative fee on our grants, and that was probably a mistake. Given the time it's taken to do some of these, I think she should be compensated for that time, or at least the county reimbursed for that time, because it has been very in-depth, some of the things we have to do. So I would ask that be increased too. Ms. Beasley thinks that'll bring it somewhere around 80,000, 81,000 when you include the administrative fee. This is a 100% reimbursement grant from ECD, so we would have to spend the funds first, submit for reimbursement, and it would reimburse us up to the $100,000 if that's what's approved. So at the end of it, if we're successful, it would be zero cost to the taxpayer locally. So that would be a plus, and it would be a 2-year program. So it's going to be done over phases of training and what over a 2-year period. So we would be looking at continuously submitting for reimbursement, doing trainings periodically throughout the entire phase for the next 2 years. So that's basically what that program is. If you look at your thing that was handed out, I'm only going to cover a couple of line items because it's pretty in depth. First one, give a description of what our proposal is. And it says through Retail Strategies Pivot and Recover program, we would receive 24-month customized training program for our local businesses with a focus on retail, restaurants, and service businesses with less than 20 employees. It would give customized training that will focus on existing small business owners to maximize operations, sales, and profit through a series of group trainings or one-on-one trainings. It would include online sales, restaurant recovery, shop local, funding resources, market research, and more. And it's also going to develop a virtual training that can be done through, there'll be workbooks and other videos that are recorded that can be accessed by anybody going forward in the future beyond the life of the program. And some businesses will also get one-on-one coaching for real estate research and property owner training and accountability. So that's basically what our proposal would be, how to use those funds locally. And one of the things we have to show is there's a project need, and I'm only going to cover one item on this, but Ms. Beasley went and did research through the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and she found that the Trousdale County's restaurant sales in 2020 were $326,617 less than they were in 2019. So at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, that is how much revenue our local restaurants lost. So that's what the Pivot and Recover is for, is to help you pivot from the COVID-19 era and recover from it. So that's basically what we're asking to do. And I would ask if this committee could vote to support that application or support that going forward. And then also Ms. Beasley had a question of whether or not that would be done under the county or the IDB. My first thought is that it'd probably be done under the county like we did the Tennessee Downtowns program. However, if it does have to be couched somewhere else other than the county, my question would be, would the IDB be willing to have it couched under you with the understanding that basically the contract administration and carrying out the program would be done with the mayor's office and retail strategy?
I would say that any possible support for our local retail and business owners is a welcome thing. And I completely would support such an endeavor, but I have some questions myself about this. One, if it is under the Industrial Development Board, if it has to be sponsored under the Industrial Development Board, would it still be administrated by your office and under Amy Thomas, therefore receiving the additional compensation?
Well, I'm going to ask for the administrative fee, whether it's under the mayor's office or under the IDB, and that's because Ms. Thomas is the one that's going to be having to keep up with all the paperwork and filing for the request for reimbursements and all that. So I'm going to ask to include that as part of the budget that we have to submit for the grant. But yeah, given that the IDB has no staff, normally if this is industrial recruiting, you would go with Tennessee Central. However, they don't do retail. So I would suggest, and I'm more than happy to do that, carrying it out as far as serving as a staff for the IDB on this grant, if it has to go there, which I don't think it does. This is just a fallback scenario. That would be done under the mayor's office if it has to be a memorandum of understanding or some kind of agreement with the IDB, we're more than happy to do that. Again, looking at it, I don't think this has to be done under the IDB. It's just a question Ms. Beasley asked me, and so I brought it to the IDB for consideration. But yeah, we'd be willing to, basically, the mayor's office would basically run the program and the IDB would just give reports, and there's nothing that be required for the members individually.
Well, I fully agree that Ms. Thomas is one of the hardest working people in the administrative building, and she deserves compensation for additional workload. And I don't have any problem with that. I just wanted to understand where that would fall if the IDB were to be the person or the entity that will fall under. The next thing I would have a question about is the actual execution of such grant. Would there be a responsibility for the members of the IDB to participate or perform any tasks under this grant?
I really don't think there'd be anything required if we do an agreement with the mayor's office, that the mayor's office is basically serving as the staff for the IDB, other than providing reports to you. I don't think there's anything the IDB itself would need to be doing, or specifically the members themselves. It would all be done on the mayor's office. We would be providing reports on how things are going. And of course, Ms. Beasley can give you reports or give you updates on it as well. But the program is mainly going to be done, as far as all the training and everything, is going to be done by Retail Strategies. We will just keep track of the billing for Retail Strategies and any other incidentals that maybe, like if we printed flyers or some kind of informational booklets or something like that, that would come out of it. But in speaking with Ms. Beasley this morning, other than the consultant fees and maybe some of those incidental printing fees and administrative fee, she couldn't foresee any other budget items that would be necessary at this point.
As each one of our members are business owners or business operators in some form, we come in contact on a daily basis with our citizens that are business owners, other business owners, and I think that we could certainly try to promote the participation in this sort of grant for our locals. But my next question would be, if try to collect my thought here. If it's up to $100,000 and the fee, including administrative fee, is up to $81,000 for Retail Strategies, does that mean you have only a $19,000 gap there to work with? Or are you talking about there's another $100,000 that is available beyond those fees?
No, we would submit a budget as part of our application. And right now what we would be suggesting is about $81,000. So the grant could go up to 100,000, so they can approve anything below that. So right now, out of the 100,000, our budget would be around 81,000. So that leaves a little bit of leeway if we wanted to apply for a little bit more. But whatever they approve at the beginning, so if we submitted for 81,000 and that's what gets approved and that's what we signed on the grant contract, that's all we're going to get.
And for that, Retail Strategies is going to provide training, research, market information for the locals. You had mentioned previously or earlier in your talk about microloans or things like that. So that's not necessarily on the table at this point. We're mostly opting towards Retail Strategies. Is that correct?
Yes, my understanding of the program, as it was explained by the ECD representative, is you could do the 100,000 technical assistance program part of it, or you could choose to do a $50,000 micro grant program that the county would then have to match another 50,000. So that's where that 100,000 would come from. But speaking with the ECD representatives, and we did have, as part of our closeout for the Tennessee downtowns, they highly suggested that we do the pivot and recover versus the normal Placemaker Grant.
Does anybody on the board have any questions or need any clarification? Mr. Graves?
Mayor, just to clarify, the Pivot and Recover program are going to be a completely separate set of objectives than what we've already hired them to do through the IDB. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. This would be something totally separate. It's not done under your existing agreement. Now, she did say there was probably some data generated that they could use that would save some cost on their side from what that's doing for the IDB. But as far as their services have been offered for under this program, it actually would kind of bring Jen Gregory and some of that group back in a little bit more. But it is completely separate from the agreement they had with the IDB. This will be another program they're helping for.
I thought that was the answer, but I guess I would suggest that since a lot of the work that they would normally do in a town that did not hire them to do what we've already hired them to do, I don't know, perhaps that's a negotiation point to get additional services because some of the work's already going to be completed. So,
well, my understanding is some of that, I guess if you want to call it the high level work as far as the county as a whole, but what they're offering in this is they're going to do some more targeted research for like restaurant specific or something like that for locations. That was my understanding of talking to them. It's going to be more to the street level versus kind of the high level what we've had before. But it would be, and again, some of it's going to be one-on-one with those business owners training or something like that. So that's going to be even beyond what we had before, because they're going to come down and assist those business owners and do classes and trainings and those kind of things, which is not part of what we're currently doing with them.
You just touched on something that would have been my next question is, are they going to physically come down and operate here locally in these classes on occasion to help these people, because these folks work a lot and they're not going to have time to travel or may not be interested in a Zoom call? I just wondered if it was going to be a physical visit.
I can't say all of them would be physically, but I understand there will be some physical visits as part of it.
Anyone else on the board have any questions about this? I know we kind of sprang it on everybody at the last moment. You haven't had an opportunity to digest it, but I think any opportunity to capture federal funds to help our local business owners is certainly worthy of our consideration. And while I'm going to give them a moment to digest this a little longer, Mayor, what you need from us is a letter of support for this. Is that correct?
Well, if we could just get a motion of support, and whether you want to do it as a letter or just make sure it's stated officially in the minutes and then provide a copy of that, that'd be fine. Either way you want to go, that's up to the IDB.
Thank you, sir. Anybody have any questions? Have you had an opportunity to digest, or do you need a moment? Mr. Graves?
I would make a motion that we support it in whatever way we decide, whether that be a letter or the application. It's free. It doesn't cost anybody anything. So I make a motion that we proceed with that.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Graves to support the Pivot and Recover grant request by the mayor of Trousdale County. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Keeping in mind that, as I understand from the mayor, that this is no burden on the board or its members. It's no cost to the board. It's no cost to the county. And we are potentially training or helping our local businesses, if I understood correctly.
Yes, sir, that's right. And at this point, I'm not asking it to be couched under the IDB. I was just asking if it couldn't be done under the mayor's office, which I believe it can, I don't see any issue to it. But just Ms. Beasley asked me, he said, if it couldn't be done under the mayor's office, would the IDB be willing to do it? So that's why I brought it to you. But in my looking at the program and all the conversations I've had with ECD, I think it'll be under the mayor's office in the county. So I don't think it will come to IDB. She just asked me that question.
I would say that if you determine in the future that it needs to be under the IDB auspice, that, you know, we revisit at least the details on that, on how that works. But beyond that, I personally don't have a problem with that. I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Graves to support this grant, and this is a request. He hasn't, this grant has not been given yet. He has not successfully secured this. He is making a request. Mr. Graves.
Mayor, is there a timeline on this that has to be completed by a certain date?
It is a rolling grant. It doesn't have a specific date it has to be put in by. However, it is, once the money's gone, it's gone. So we need to apply as soon as we can.
I'm going to ask one last time, do we have a second? Yes.
Thank you. If we could collaborate, if the IDB, so that if this grant is received and awarded, do we need to add that longevity into the motion for its existence? Basically what you were just saying about that, if the IDB needs to step in, we'll step in.
Yes, and
I think I've just about confused myself. So.
that is possible, that if Mr. Graves chose to amend his motion to include that, but let's be clear, what we're doing tonight is making a show of support to give the mayor more support towards the grant, for the grant application. I kind of
To
repeated
approve the
myself.
grant, we'll need to come back to the board.
Well, let me clarify. I'm sorry, I should have been a little bit more clear. What I'm asking for is the support of the IDB for filing it. Okay, at this point, I don't think it's going to require anything beyond that from the IDB. It's just support for the application. If it does require something beyond that, right now, my initial question is, would you even consider, if it had to be couched under the IDB, would you even consider it? I'm not asking for any method beyond that. If it did have to be couched under the IDB, obviously we'd come back and we'd have Lisa Beasley here that could give you more detail on it. Right now, the only thing I'm asking for is support for the application itself.
I'll make a second to that motion then.
Mr. Graves, do you want to leave your motion the way it stands?
Yes, I think so at this time, because all we're doing is writing a letter of support or maybe helping with the application, but anything beyond that that would be required of the IDB, I think would be discussed after the grant was granted. That was my thought process.
So can we say that's in the form of a motion?
Yes.
So if I'm understanding clearly, Mr. Graves' motion is to show support for the Pivot and Recover grant request application that the mayor, Stephen Chambers of Trousdale County, is going to file. But if it requires further involvement or responsibility of the IDB, that would need to be revisited and discussed at a later date. Am I correct? Yes. Does that sound accurate? Ms. Bay, do you concur? So I have a motion and I have a second. Are there any questions or discussions? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? It does pass. Mayor, if you feel like what we spoke on record tonight is sufficient to support that, Ms. Petty is not with us, but she will review the tape and do the minutes, and I can submit those to you in writing and whatever you need in support.
Yeah, I think as long as that motion as stated is put on the minutes, I think that'll be sufficient. However, if you as chairman want to do a letter saying we approved it, I mean, that'll be well that'd be good as well. But I think the motion has stated, as long as it's clearly stated in the minutes and then shown that it's approved, I think that'll be enough support.
I'm sure Ms. Petty will do a very accurate job of that from the tape, but I will call her and discuss it with her and make sure that she is clear that the specificity of that motion needs to be spelled out, clearly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate your help. That being said, we've come to the end of our meeting. Item number 11 is public comments. If there's anyone in the gallery or have any public comments pertaining to tonight's agenda, we welcome you to speak at this time. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Mr. Graves makes a motion to adjourn. Ms. Bay seconds. All in favor, say aye. It is passed. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.